The reason it was in the United Kingdom is because I had lived and worked here in London for 4 years before joining Microsoft. Our son was born here. We loved the country so much, we ensured he could become a citizen. And he still is a British national to this day. So for me, whenever I get to visit London, it's not just a visit, it's a little bit of a visit to what was once a very cherished home. So it's nice to be here. I thought I'd share a few perspectives on AI, and having heard the tail end of that last conversation, I think I could build on it perhaps a bit. First, you won't be surprised to hear somebody from Microsoft come and say, we're excited about the promise of AI. In fact, if we weren't excited about it, it wouldn't make sense to spend so much time and energy creating it. It is a technology that we think can do many good things for the United Kingdom and for the world. It can improve healthcare, it can help us diagnose new forms of cancer, existing forms of cancer, faster than doctors can. It can help us develop new cures for disease. It can help us marshal our resources if we're trying to respond to a natural disaster. It can improve productivity growth at a time when there is a shortage of productivity growth. And when you think about all 38 members of the OECD, we are collectively going through a new era in human history, an era that literally hasn't been experienced since the Black Plague. Populations are declining, and especially in the OECD countries, working age populations are declining in percentage to the population as a whole, meaning that fewer people will be working to support more people who are too young or too old to work. We need more productivity growth, and AI should be an important source of that. At the same time, we would hasten to add, we need to go into this with our eyes wide open. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. I think we all look back at the experience with social media and think, maybe we were a little too euphoric a decade ago. Around the world, we looked at the Arab Spring and said that social media would be the savior of democracy. And yet just a few years later, we found social media becoming a weapon aimed against democracy. We can't afford to go into this new AI era without our eyes wide open. There are real risks, there are real problems, and we'll have to figure out how to solve them. I think it helps to prioritize a bit the problems we need to focus on. I think it starts with safety. We need to assure the public that AI will augment human capability and be used safely. And there are many technologies that we take for granted in the world today that our ancestors would probably find astounding. The notion that we get in a metal cylinder and close the doors and fly 500 miles an hour, 5 miles above the Earth, would seem extraordinarily dangerous to people who were alive 120 years ago. The same is true for the elevators that lift us into the sky, the high-speed railroads we take, even the school buses on which we put our children. And just as for those other technologies, we will have to do for AI what it takes to make sure that technology is safe, that it remains subject to human control, that we have the ability to slow it down or turn it off if it's not functioning the way we want. But it's not safety alone that we need to think about. There's a list of other issues as well. We need to think about the issues that AI in the wrong hands can pose for national security, for the protection of democracy, for the protection of our elections, including the elections we'll see next year here in the United Kingdom, as well as the United States. And of course, there are a lot of other issues as well. What will it mean for skills? What will it mean for jobs? What will it mean for the sustainability of the planet when we have even more computers using even more electricity? So the real question is how? How do we address all of this? Well, I would say two things. First, the companies that build and operate these systems are going to need to step up, Microsoft certainly included. And we've been working for 6 years to build the processes, the practices, to train the personnel, to have the governance system inside Microsoft to ensure that AI is used responsibly. And yet I am not traveling the world, and I did not come into the United Kingdom to say, don't worry, be happy, trust us, we'll get it right. I don't think any country should be willing to just put its trust completely in a set of companies. This technology is so powerful, it can do so much good, and yet it also raises so many issues that it needs to be subject to the rule of law, and we will need regulations to govern it. And so the real question of the day as we get together in June of 2023 is this: how do we best govern AI? I think it starts by having some sense of a regulatory model, if you will, and from our perspective, we think about a regulatory model through the lens of the technology model itself. And in the world of technology, especially in the world of software, we always talk about a technology stack. And there are three aspects or layers of the technology stack that I think are worth thinking about. At the very top, there are all the applications that will use AI. Now, the good thing for us to keep in mind is that we live in a world of laws and regulations already. Financial services institutions have to comply with a wealth of regulation. If they use AI to decide who should get a mortgage, who should get a loan, then they still need to comply with the law. But what we'll need to ensure is that our courts and our regulators are well versed in how AI works so they can apply existing laws and regulations. And we as a company are committed to working with institutions so they have access not just to the technology and how to use it, but to best practices around responsible AI so they can comply with all the laws and regulations that exist today. And there will likely need to be some evolution and perhaps even new laws that will impact the applications layer. But of course, where the conversation is really going is below the applications layer to the models themselves. And that's why I said at a speech in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, that there is some category of models that is so powerful, that is so impactful, that there will need to be certain regulations and laws, new regulations and laws that will apply to them. We'll need to figure out what exactly that means. I think it probably means that before a model can be deployed, it will have to pass some kind of safety review. That's what Microsoft and OpenAI do today. We have a deployment safety board ourselves to review the safety features and standards. And just like an airplane, just like a bus, just like an automobile, a powerful model will probably need to pass such a review, and it, in our view, probably should get a license. And of course, that means there needs to be a licensor in a position to make that decision. But in addition to the regulation of the model level, we think that there's another aspect that will probably need to be considered. These models don't get deployed in some abstract space, even though we like to talk about the cloud. They get deployed in powerful data centers. And when you think about critical and sensitive uses like the use of AI to, say, control critical infrastructure, to control the water supply, to control the flow of traffic, to control the electrical grid, we would say that it will probably make sense to require that the application user that's using AI for that purpose needs to deploy the model in a secure data center, and that data center itself probably will need to pass certain standards as well. Standards that will ensure that we have an additional safety brake, if you will, so that we have 2 layers of safety to reassure the public. And we'll have to pass certain standards for cybersecurity and physical security and national security, and that makes sense as well. In sum, we'll need to find a new path, and it's going to require a balance. If regulation is too heavy, then innovation will proceed too slowly. If innovation goes too quickly without sufficient regulation, then we could put safety at risk. We need to think this through. We'll need to talk it through together. The last thing I would say is this. The United Kingdom will be one of the great places where AI is developed. It will need to be a place that can tap the full panoply of intellectual resources here. And as I learned when I lived here, Great Britain may be a small island, but the United Kingdom is a large country. It's especially a large country when it comes to the intellectual powerhouse that the great universities and great businesses here represent. We'll want to make sure that the entire economy has access to the use of these resources. We'll want to make sure that the basic research in the great universities here continues to have access to the more expensive computational resources needed to keep research at the forefront. And for all of these things, we will need a conversation and we will need collaboration that brings countries together. In the United States, there's a proposal before Congress to spend $2.6 billion to create a national AI research resource. In effect, a great data center for the use of the country's universities. Well, you might have noticed that as part of the agreement between the President and the Congress to raise the debt ceiling, our Congress has a little less money to spend than it did before. That's an opportunity to do what probably needs to be done in the first place. We should create an international AI research resource. And we should bring together the United Kingdom and the United States and Canada and Europe and Japan and Australia and the world's great democracies, including India, and work together. And we should work together not only to provide our peoples with the resources they need to excel, we need to work together to create a regulatory model that fits together with interoperable regulation. Because there are some areas where regulation can differ and life will go on just fine. One country may permit AI to be used in one way and another may not. But there are other areas where if we cannot get regulators to work together, if we can't get regulation that fits together, we're going to end up with confusion in a way that will be unproductive. If one country says publish one kind of transparency report and 3 other countries say publish 3 different ones, well, everybody's going to be able to read whatever is published. We're far better off getting on the same page about what should be published. But more than that, if there is a licensing regime or any kind of regime to govern the safety features of models, and we're going to govern and regulate how these models are created, we'll be in far better shape if we can get a single model for regulation itself. And when it comes to the protection of cyber and national security, there are no 2 countries in the world that are more important when it comes to that partnership than the United Kingdom and the United States. So there too, we would be well served to work together. In sum, I would say this. I think we should be excited about the promise of this new technology. We should have our eyes wide open about the challenges it will create. We should ask companies to step up. We should ask governments to go faster. But more than anything, we should ask all of ourselves and everyone else to find new ways to work together. Because we'll need to work together across borders to get this right. Thank you very much.